G'day legends, I hope that you're having a great day. Now, I've taken a few days off because I've been really unwell and I'm still not feeling that great. As you know, with my medical stuff and chemo and whatever, my immune system has been blown to pieces. So I do catch a lot of this and it really does suck. But I'd also really like to thank you guys for all your support over the last couple of days with taking some risks on the podcast. I really didn't know how that would be met, but it's great to see that people can think critically, listen to things they don't agree with and argue the point and go from there, not just have this silly cancel culture. It's really great to see. Now, I thought that the war was going to end yesterday, as we've seen Tinder completely banned in Russia and it won't even work with a VPN. This is the second time we've seen something like this, as we have seen Pornhub banned very early on in the conflict as well. And coming from a soldier background, and I met my girlfriend on Tinder, I don't know how soldiers can still fight a war without the hub, without Tinder. So I thought the war was coming to a close then. Now, Ukraine Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny, in an interview recently with the Washington Post, has spoken about the counteroffensive and the criticisms of the counteroffensive taking longer than expected. Also, with Zelensky noting that the advance is slower than desired. So Zaluzhny has pointed at the lack of air power again, as many Ukrainian officials have. And we've spoken at length about how people in my circle have raised concern over the West pushing Ukraine into an offensive without supplying air power could absolutely be an act of military negligence, saying that supplying only some of the equipment needed could be a death trap and that the Western commanders and leaders should take some accountability for this, that if they themselves launched an offensive like this without having the air power, they would be held to account and wouldn't do it in their own doctrine. So let's have a look at what was actually said here, and this was from the Washington Post. So let's just say the number of aircraft that are on duty near our western borders is twice as much as the number of Russian aircraft devastating our positions. We can't take at least a third of it from there and move it here, saying a third from NATO into Ukraine to defend. But we know the problems with this, and we're going to talk about some solutions to these problems aren't just getting the aircraft and the sort of diplomatic, economic problems around that in the private companies, but the training, the timeframes of the pilots. Russia's more modern fleet of Su-35s have a far superior radar and missile range. Ukraine's older jets cannot compete. Troops in the ground are easily targeted as a result. We've seen this not only with the fighter aircraft, but as well with Russia's attack helicopter fleet, as well attacking the armour on the ground. Zelensky is saying nobody is saying that tomorrow we should rearm and get 120 planes. Why? I do not need 120 planes. I'm not going to threaten a whole world. A very limited number would be enough, but they are needed because there is no other way, because the enemy is using a different generation of aviation. It's like we'd go on the offensive with bows and arrows now, and everyone would say, are you crazy? But with this question, no. So the question around going in without then the modern fighter aircraft. Now, the problem that Ukraine is facing with a lot of this modern equipment isn't just crews going in these, it's the experience, the time frames of these crews. It's easy to put someone in a tank or a Bradley, teach them a few things and go from there. But anyone who's served in the military has worked around these very complex systems, and military systems have got more and more complex with the amount of technology now jammed into these. The thing that Ukraine doesn't have is the training time or the experience on the machines. But Ukraine does have plenty of warfighting experience, which can definitely help the West, because the West has very limited warfighting, especially conventional warfighting experience. And this brings me to my point, is I wonder if we are going about most efficient and effective way to actually get this equipment into Ukraine. We've seen foreign fighters participate in Ukraine with varying results and very different experiences, some the best experience and some absolutely the worst experience. And Ukraine itself has got absolutely varying results from that foreign force as well, with receiving some very highly motivated professional soldiers and a lot of Instagrammers just wanting an M4 and some private donations as well. So We know that NATO is not going to deploy troops or close the airspace. Close the airspace has a whole number of separate issues, but if deploying troops was going to happen, it would have happened. It was not going to take place now 16 months into this conflict. So what I wonder is there a place where a highly paid professional force could solve some of these issues? So an example of this is with the Wagner PMC. So if we ignore some of the recent events and mutiny and whatever, Wagner itself was a success for Russia gaining some territory, and they offered large pay packets to ex-special forces soldiers both in Russia and abroad as well. What my point is it takes so long for people to get competent on these. It takes years and years for fighter jets, years and years for tanks, things like this, and the cost is massive. The training time is also massive. So is there a place to have a foreign fighting force or even a private force that has offered massive pay packets? And I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, $1 million a month. I don't know, but I think we could justify that amount of pay packet in certain positions to basically eliminate the training time and experience time and get these into combat, get them into fighting almost instantly. And I believe that these salaries could be outweighed by the survival of some of this equipment, like with the Leopards and Bradleys, the first ones we saw lost. And I don't want to keep harping on this, but they were lost a lot due to experience of the maneuver on the ground. And right there you have tens of millions of dollars of equipment. If you had guys that have worked in that for years and years, you could afford to pay them a lot of money. And especially when we're talking F-16, that if an F-16 can survive one more mission that it was going to, it has saved you tens of millions of dollars. Now, money talks, and I know it does. I was in the military around other professionals, and I know a lot of guys who went and left and worked for military contractors as well. Now, could this be through private military officially? And it could be done officially, that we're raising, this unit and we're recruiting these people and a lot of money. We know Ukraine has got a lot of money given to it to buy its own goods rather than goods just being delivered in hard goods, if that makes sense. Or potentially could an oligarch fund it, like we have seen with Prigozhin funding Wagner PMs. So taking retired Westerners or Westerners who have moved out of the military into these equipment. Could this save money? Absolutely. Could it save lives? Absolutely. Is a pilot who was trained for 6 months on a quick course in Europe somewhere in F-16 going to be as good of a pilot on the F-16 as someone who's flown it for 10 years in Iraq and Afghanistan? No. Could money sway someone to come and fly that? I absolutely believe so. And I believe even if you said $1 million a month, well, if it saves one F-16 from getting shot down, that is already paid for your whole fleet of pilots at that amount of money as well. Now, the argument will be, well, this is not going to train Ukrainian indigenous forces on those platforms after the war. Well, yes, but training indigenous local forces during wartime is not what you need. Ukraine need to finish the war, but the time to train these forces is not during wartime. Wait till after the war to then transition Ukraine to the NATO-style training, weapon systems, all of this. After the war is the time to do that and spend years doing it, not during the war, when the stakes of this war for Ukraine are massive. Of course, this creates issues around who exactly will you get, because they'll be in it for the money rather than, their heart in it, like a lot of the soldiers. And would they be willing to make the same risks and push as hard and even follow some orders? We don't know. And rumour had it that the Australian Army used to fire soldiers if they earned more money than the commanding officers, because they couldn't trust in a life or death situation that then they would follow orders. But I know personally that there are foreign fighters who had to leave Ukraine, do some work to come back because they weren't getting paid enough just to cover their expenses at home and over there as well. So of course, then they missed out on a soldier fighting there as well. What I'm suggesting is there a place for large funding of ex-veterans to come from the West to man this equipment? Pilots, mechanics, commanders, things like this. Not all of it, but I think that would solve a lot of issues very quickly. But money talks. You're going to have to offer large pay packets. But this pay would be easily outweighed with the survival of this equipment, I believe, very quickly. We know that there's been a massive drip feeding of equipment into Ukraine, and this, of course, has been for a lot of reasons. I believe in the beginning it was because there was doubt about how long Ukraine could actually last. If we knew day one that Ukraine was going to be 16 months into this launching a counteroffensive, there wouldn't be as much umming and ahhing about whether to give equipment. It would have been given back then. And we saw that as Ukraine started to push back and hold off, they started with the lower tech equipment when working up to the more high tech equipment. And this was, I believe, to see if Ukraine could be trusted with this equipment, both in striking in Russia, which they are not allowed to do, and the concerns around corruption. Now with the supplying of equipment is how much can we make, like how much realistically can we make of the shells, as many people are saying we can't make as much as Ukraine is using. And with a lot of these tanks, planes, whatever, is we'll give what Ukraine's logistics and command can actually handle. You can't just send 1,000 tanks in with no support. Like, the logistics can only handle so many at once. But I think the way to negate a lot of these issues is with what I was suggesting before, that you contract in a lot of this, including the people sitting in the hot seat. But I do know that this brings a whole nother set of issues. We've also seen a lot of private money flowing into Ukraine with nothing to do with the war. This is investment only. These are investors hedging bets on Ukraine winning, all the way up to something like Vanguard are investing in farms, real estate, businesses, things like this, because of course those things took a hit on their value, and if Ukraine win the war, will return to their value or even higher potentially. For example, imagine if you bought an apartment in Kyiv, in a capital city in Europe, but while Russia was on the doorstep, you would have got it for a steal, and then after the war, if Ukraine liberate all their territories and it's held an independent country, that will be worth a hell of a lot more. So I know people will talk about ethical investing, but investing like this at the high level, they don't give a shit about ethics. They care about making money. And if they can buy land, farms, businesses at a reduced cost, they're hedging their bets for Ukraine to win the war and make money on their investment. Now, why I bring this up is, could we possibly see the rise of more private military contractors to protect their interests, like we have seen Gazprom. Gazprom is the largest company in Russia, somewhat state-owned, somewhat privately owned, heavily controlled by the Kremlin, but Gazprom has their own PMC to protect their interest. Could we see something like this? I believe that we are in the age of seeing the rise of large private military contractors, because militaries just can't get away with what they used to get away with. They want plausible deniability, and this is going to go ever. I believe that we're in the beginnings of seeing the rise of more PMCs, because states and businesses can't get away with what they used to get away with smartphones, drones, people digging in the internet, things like this. So let's have a look at the maps and see where things are changing. So of course we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv, the red areas occupied since the 24th of February 22, and the purple since 2014. Here we have Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Now, someone we're going to talk about is Belarus as well, where Wagner and they're saying up to 8,000 fighters have come into Belarus. Of course, we have Kaliningrad here, which is a part of Russia. So let's zoom in on the maps and have a look at what we are seeing. So somewhere we do need to talk about is this bridge, the Antonivka Bridge, in this location here. Now, of course, this bridge was taken down, but we do suspect that Ukrainian troops have crossed to the left bank of the Dnieper River and are operating in and around this area, although the maps don't show any bridgehead gained or positions gained in there. But let's look at this from the 1st of July from the British MOD. Since around the 23rd of June 23, Ukrainian forces have almost certainly restarted deploying personnel to the east bank of the Dnieper River in the Kherson Oblast, near the ruined Antonovsky Bridge. Fighting intensified on the east bank from the 27th of June 23. The defending Russian force includes elements of Russia's 7th Guards Air Assault Division, part of the Dnipro Group Force, the DGF. In recent weeks, Russia has highly likely reallocated elements of the DGF defending the bank of Dnieper River to reinforce the Zaporizhzhia sector. Combat around the bridgehead is almost certainly complicated by the flooding, destruction, and residual mud from the collapse of the Kakhovka Dam on the 6th of June 23. So this is the area in question, and here we have the Novokakhovka Dam here that flooded then this region, but we don't see any map changes there. But I think that is very interesting. And of course, here we have the nuclear power plant that there has been warnings again from Zelensky that Russia may be developing something there to create an incident. So let's have a look around here, and this is where we see a lot of the fighting. So to the south of Stopovy here. So today is the 3rd. This map updated early this morning. So let's go back to the 30th, and we don't see any movements in here, but we do see that Ukraine is coming up to these first line of these Russian defensive positions here, coming down in between two of these, but we know there is a large defensive work through here. So next we're going to go into Orokhiv, and have we seen some changes here? So let's go back to the 29th, and we do see that Ukraine does make some ground towards these defensive positions, somewhat in the direction of Robotyny in here too. So we do know there's been a lot of fighting down from here. So let's have a look across some different maps. So then if we have a look at this region across then the ISW, so this is what we're looking at today. So let's compare this against 4 days ago when I last spoke to you and gave you a map briefing update. Now this may not be the greatest picture ever, but if we zoom in, so this region we're talking about down to the south of Lobkovy here, we can see that Ukraine has pushed further to the south here. So we line up where the defensive works are, and this red line through here in the dotted line, we can see that the dotted line being the front line has moved further south. Ukraine have had some successes in this region. Now let's look down in Orokhiv in this region and see what we're looking at. So then on this map, we're going to come across into here. So we started seeing this little push here coming out, and this does look like then Ukraine has pushed across here and come up, and maybe even Russia gained some little amount of territory here, or it's just that the way Ukraine has pushed in here makes it look more squared off, but the actual changes territorially in here were very minimal. The Rybar in and around this region. So on the first we have this western region, this Lobkovy region, Stopovy here, and this is what the Rybar is saying, that there has been more ground taken to then the south of Pyatkiki here, which I'm pronouncing horrifically, I know, but has cleared more positions in and around here, right coming up into this village here. Now let's look where they're zooming in on, which is to the south of Orokhiv, where we were just speaking about, to the north of Robotyny as well. So here is Robotyny. We see this push in, and I think where the front line is actually sitting is showing fairly close, although the Rybar isn't showing some of these positions pushing up on this hard edge like the deep state is showing. But we have a zoom in on this as well. They're just talking in and around this region. Now this, of course, the afforestation is these tree built up regions that they're fighting in and around here. So if we see where this turns down to the south, this is where it's turning. It's right in and around this region. Now we can't line this up brilliantly, but I think it's showing a fairly similar picture here. Now on this map, it doesn't show Russia's defensive positions, but there are large defensive positions could be supporting these tree line areas in here. We definitely see Ukraine is making some ground here, although it has slowed down significantly from the beginning of this. This is where we saw the most amount of the fighting. Let's go into this first on this Rivne, Pil, Makarivka region, this axis down into these regions. So let's go back to the 30th and see what changed. Now, it looks like a lot changed, but as far as the actual front line, not that much change. It just came from green to blue. So we actually saw, if anything, Russia gain a little bit of ground in and around to the north of Pyrotyny here, and that. So from the 29th, we do see that Ukraine does make a push in through Pyrotyny here and down to the south near Novodonetsky as well. So we do see some more push-ins in from there, but nothing too dramatic, especially when we zoom out and see that there's still a while until the defensive works. Why do I keep bringing this up? Because this is where the reserves are. This is where the real fight is going to be to create a breakthrough from here. This was from 4 days ago, and as you can see, Ukraine has had a further push through the south here. So we look at this spot height as 218 as a reference, and we do see that Ukraine has pushed a fair bit further down through here. As we know, Ukraine did come through Rivnopol as well. So Ukraine is still advancing on this region. Let's go up into somewhere where everyone's talking about, which is Bakhmut. And we do hear that there is some counteroffensives from the Russian forces, as well as Ukraine taking some ground. So let's compare this over the last few days. So of course, we have Kromove, Bakhmut here. Now, we do see on this map from 4 days ago, and this was from a little bit further ago, so we've got about a week and 4 days. So let's have a look in the 4 day. We do see that Ukraine did come up right up through near Berkivka around this reservoir. Now, what is being shown is that Russia have taken back, or at least claiming, being yellow, have claimed that they've taken back some positions in around here and have brought it back then into the yellow. Now, Bakhmut itself, to me, isn't looking much different, although Russia is claiming some more land being yellow around this road through Ivanovsky, and this was one of the 2 road of deaths or road of lives, however it was reported. But Bakhmut, the actual centre, isn't looking any different. Now, what about to the south of Bakhmut? As we have seen, Ukraine did cross over these water reservoirs here. Now, this is the region, and to my eye, isn't looking anything different or any significant difference at all, if any difference. But it is interesting to see that Russia has made back some ground here, and we do know that there are claims that Russia has launched counter-offensives in some areas in the northeast as well to counter Ukraine's offensives in the south and the east. But as well, we see Bakhmut and then these large build-up of the defensive works back here. Now let's go on the deep state and have a look at this. So let's go back to then the 28th, and what we do see is, have a look on this north where we just spoke about near Berkivka, is we do see Russia make some ground there. Now in the south, do we see much change? Yes, we do. We see Ukraine make significant changes to the east around where this defensive works here is. Like we've spoken about, you don't need to go through a defensive work if you can outmaneuver it. We do see they're pushing to the northeast of this work and to the southeast as well. But we do see Russia did make back some ground in and around here too. So we do know there is heavy fighting once again in and around Bakhmut. Then let's have a look then at the Bakhmut map from today and last week. So here on the right we have Bakhmut from today, and on the left we have from the 27th. So a bit of an older one, but the most recent RIBAR that I have. Now, what is it showing different? Now, the actual different in where the line is, I don't think is showing too much different, although it is showing in the south that Russia has regained some of the territories that it said that it had lost previously to Ukraine by this dark blue region. I believe the RIBAR actually on the front line isn't showing too much different. But these maps are hard to compare as they're at different levels of zoom and show some different little bits and pieces. But we do know that the front line there is very fluid. And there are a lot of talks around Russia launching more offensives around the Savatov region, but it isn't showing any differences on the map. But we do have, the RIBAR does show that there are more pushes in and around this region. But that will end our mapping for today. And there's not too much changes in the mapping, and we know that the fight is really only just getting started as Ukraine starts to approach the main defensive works of Russia. The Polish Minister Coordinator for the Special Services has released this tweet. Due to tense situation on the border of Belarus, I decided to reinforce our force with a group of 500 officers from the Polish police, from riot control units and counter-terrorism. They will join 5,000 functions of this, which is the border guard, and 2,000 soldiers guarding the security of this border. And as well as we know that Latvia and Lithuania have called upon NATO to reinforce the border. Now, where we're talking about is in this border through here. So Lithuania, Latvia and Poland that we have talked about, that could Wagner come through to Kaliningrad and cut off these Baltic states from the rest of NATO and Europe. And we're seeing a lot more forces deployed in this region. Now, I got sent this as well that I thought was interesting from the ABC, which is Australia's publicly funded broadcast of the Human Rights Watch, reports on new evidence of Ukrainian use of banned landmines. So, the new evidence of indiscriminate use by Ukrainian forces of banned anti-personnel mines against Russian troops by the Human Rights Watch. The Human Rights Watch has called on Ukraine's government to follow through on a commitment made earlier this month not to employ such weapons and investigate the suspect use and held accountable for those responsible. The Ukrainian government's pledge to investigate its military apparent use of banned anti-personnel mines is an important recognition of its duty to protect civilians from the Human Rights Watch. Although the letter in May was not received and the Ukraine's embassy in Washington did not respond to Reuters' request for comment. So in 2005, we've talked about this before, that Ukraine ratified a 1997 international treaty banning these mines and demanding the destruction of the stocks of weapons. We know that these weapons were not then destroyed. What we do know, though, is Russia did not join this treaty and still uses these landmines that then violate international humanitarian law. And this is because landmines, they don't discriminate. If you are a dog, a child, a horse, a soldier, whatever, a bird, these will go off and kill or maim you. A follow-on from a January report that Ukrainian soldiers fired rockets that scattered thousands of PFM-1, known as the pedal mine, into Russian-occupied areas around the eastern city of Izum between April and September 22, when Kiev's forces recaptured. So Ukraine was scattering these mines into here. It says Uragan 220mm rockets, then each indiscriminately dispersed 312 PMF-1 anti-personnel mines. And the use of landmines has been from both Russia and Ukraine, and civilians have been caught up in these indiscriminate mines laid by both countries. We know that the demining bill will be billions and billions of dollars, and I've heard up to 100 years to actually clear Ukraine of mines. And I thought that this article was interesting, especially coming from the ABC. One of the problems with a lot of these weapon systems and when you're signing these conventions is your enemy can use weapons against you that you can't use. But signing onto these conventions, you are accepting that risk. Purse-triggered anti-personnel mines are a horrific thing because they're not meant to kill you, they're made to maim you. And that doesn't matter if you're a soldier, the correct target, or a child, or anything. This causes a huge issue. The reason they are there to maim you is because then you are a burden on the logistics system, the medical system, things like this. Having a soldier injured causes more harm to your enemy's resources than just killing them. Legends, that's all I've had for you today. This video was absolutely hell to make for some reason. I think it's just because my head feels so cloudy. I've started, restarted, edited, deleted like 50 times. So if you'd like to support me, links down below, but never feel obliged. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. Bye-bye.